Olivia Carter stood blocking the office doorway at exactly 5:30, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the man reaching for his coat. Daniel Brooks had worked here for 5 years. 5 years of perfect reports, declined promotions, and 0 personal conversations. He never joined happy hours, never mentioned weekends, never stayed a minute past 5:30. She asked the question no one else dared to ask. "What's stopping you from dating, Daniel?" His hand froze on the coat sleeve. The answer he was about to give would not just silence her. It would expose a truth he had sacrificed everything to protect. 3 months before that question, Olivia Carter walked into her new corner office for the first time. 32 years old, newly appointed CEO, youngest in the company's history. She had fought her way up from nothing. No family, no inheritance, no connections. Just relentless work and a belief that everyone deserved a chance to build something meaningful. Her first task was simple. Learn her people. Understand who made the company run. She started with the personnel files, marketing, sales, operations, then finance. Most files told predictable stories. Ambitious employees climbing ladders, switching departments, negotiating raises. But one file made her stop. Daniel Brooks, senior financial analyst, 5 consecutive years of outstanding performance reviews, 3 declined promotions. Reason listed each time was the same 2 words. Personal reasons. No elaboration, no context. Just personal reasons repeated like a locked door. Olivia leaned back in her chair and studied his employee photo. 38 years old, clean-shaven, eyes that looked tired but focused. His expression revealed nothing. She flipped through his records again. No disciplinary issues, no complaints, no requests for time off beyond standard holidays. He was, by every metric, the perfect employee. And yet he had refused to advance 3 times. A man this talented did not stay invisible by accident. He was hiding something. The next morning, Olivia made a point to observe Daniel Brooks in person. She walked through the finance department at 9:15, coffee in hand, nodding at employees who greeted her. Daniel sat at a desk near the window. His workspace was immaculate. No family photos on display, no personal items, no coffee mug with a clever slogan. Just a computer, a stack of files, and a small drawer that remained closed. He worked with quiet efficiency, fingers moving across the keyboard without hesitation. He did not look up when she passed. At noon, Olivia noticed something strange. Daniel pulled out his phone at exactly 12 o'clock. He stepped away from his desk, walked to the empty stairwell, and made a call. His voice, usually flat and professional, softened into something almost tender. She could not hear the words, but she saw his face change. For 30 seconds, Daniel Brooks looked like a completely different person. Then the call ended. He returned to his desk. The mask came back. She asked his supervisor about him later that afternoon. The supervisor shrugged and said, Daniel was reliable, always on time, always accurate, never caused problems. When Olivia pressed for more details, the supervisor admitted he knew almost nothing about Daniel's personal life. The man had worked there for 5 years and never once mentioned a hobby, a vacation, or a weekend plan. He came in, did his job, and disappeared at exactly 5:30 every single day. That answer was not enough. Olivia approached a group of employees in the break room the following week. She kept her tone casual, asking general questions about team dynamics. Eventually, she steered the conversation toward Daniel. One woman from accounting shook her head and said Daniel was nice but impossible to know. Another employee, a young man who had joined the company 2 years ago, offered a blunter assessment. He called Daniel a ghost. The man came in, did his job, and vanished. 5 years. Not a single happy hour. Not one. Someone mentioned Daniel was a widower with a son, but no one knew anything beyond that. His wife had died. He had a kid. That was the entire story anyone could tell. Olivia decided to take a direct approach. She sent Daniel an email requesting a meeting in her office. He arrived exactly on time, standing in her doorway with his hands clasped in front of him. She gestured for him to sit. He remained standing. She told him she had reviewed his file and was impressed. His work was exceptional. His attention to detail was unmatched. The company needed people like him in leadership positions. She offered him the promotion to department head, better salary, better title, a chance to shape the direction of the finance team. Daniel's response came without hesitation. He said no. Olivia waited for an explanation. None came. She asked if something was wrong with the company. He said no. She asked if something was wrong with her leadership. He said no. She asked why he kept refusing opportunities that most employees would fight for. Daniel looked at her directly for the first time since entering the room. His voice was calm and final. He told her he needed to leave at 5:30 every day. No exceptions. That was his only condition. And the department head position required late meetings, weekend reviews, unpredictable hours. He could not commit to that. He would not commit to that. Olivia tried to negotiate. She suggested flexible arrangements, reduced responsibilities, modified expectations. Daniel shook his head at each offer. He thanked her for the opportunity and said he was content in his current role. Then he glanced at his watch. 5:27. He asked if they were finished. Olivia had no choice but to nod. Daniel walked out of her office, grabbed his coat from his desk, and left the building at exactly 5:30. She watched him go from her window. He moved quickly, not running but not strolling either. A man with somewhere important to be. She wondered where he went every evening. She wondered what pulled him away with such urgency. She wondered what kind of person could be so talented and so determined to stay small. 3 months passed. Olivia kept watching. Daniel kept his routines. Phone call at noon, departure at 5:30. No variation, no exceptions. Her curiosity grew into something closer to obsession. She found herself thinking about him during meetings, during dinners, during the quiet hours when she sat alone in her expensive apartment. She had spent her whole life believing that success required sacrifice, that loneliness was the price of ambition. But Daniel seemed to have made a different calculation. He had chosen smallness on purpose. He had chosen invisibility, and she could not understand why. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday in October. Olivia positioned herself in the hallway at 5:28. She watched Daniel pack his bag with the same precise movements he used every day. Coat on, bag over shoulder, keys in hand. He walked toward the exit and found her blocking his path. His expression flickered with something between surprise and resignation. She did not wait for him to speak first. She asked him directly. What was stopping him from dating? He was young. He was talented. He was objectively good-looking. Why was he living like a monk? Why had he shut himself off from everyone and everything outside this office? Daniel's hand tightened on his bag strap. His jaw tensed. She could see him calculating his response, weighing his options, deciding how much to reveal. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled. He told her that some doors stayed closed for a reason. Not every locked room hid a tragedy. Some just held something too precious to risk. The words hung between them. Olivia opened her mouth to respond, but Daniel was already moving. He stepped around her, pushed through the exit door, and disappeared into the parking lot. She stood alone in the empty hallway, his answer echoing in her mind. Too precious to risk. What could possibly be too precious to risk? She realized then that she had been asking the wrong question. The mystery was not why Daniel avoided dating. The mystery was what he was protecting. And Olivia Carter, who had never backed down from a challenge in her life, decided she would find out. The days after the hallway confrontation passed slowly. Olivia did not approach Daniel again, but she never stopped watching. She observed him from her office window, through the glass walls of conference rooms, across the open floor of the finance department. His routines remained unchanged. Arrival at 8:45, phone call at noon, departure at 5:30. The precision was almost mechanical, like a man running on a schedule he had memorized down to the second. She noticed details she had missed before. Daniel always bought 2 lunches from the cafeteria, but he only ate 1 at his desk. The second lunch disappeared into his bag every afternoon at 5:25. When colleagues gathered to discuss weekend plans, he kept his head down and typed faster. When someone made a joke, he offered a thin smile that never reached his eyes. He was polite, he was professional, he was completely absent even when physically present. The whispers started among the staff. Olivia overheard 2 women from accounting speculating near the coffee machine. One suggested Daniel might have a secret girlfriend, someone he visited every evening, someone he called every day at noon. The other woman dismissed the idea, arguing that a man with a secret girlfriend would at least seem happy sometimes. Daniel never seemed happy. He seemed like someone enduring something. They stopped talking when they noticed Olivia standing nearby. A week later, Olivia found herself in Daniel's workspace for the first time. She had a legitimate reason. She needed the quarterly projections he had been preparing, and he was stuck in a meeting on the 4th floor. His desk looked exactly as she remembered. Computer screen locked, files stacked neatly, no personal touches anywhere. But this time, she noticed his small drawer was slightly open. Just a crack, just enough to reveal something inside. She knew she should not look. She knew this crossed a line she had drawn for herself. But the question that had been burning in her mind for weeks pushed her forward. She pulled the drawer open another inch. Inside was a photograph, face down. She picked it up and turned it over. The image showed Daniel standing on a beach, his arm around a beautiful woman with dark hair and bright eyes. Between them stood a little boy, maybe 3 years old, laughing at the camera with pure joy. They looked like a perfect family, frozen in a perfect moment. On the back of the photograph, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Sarah and Ethan. Our whole world. 2019. Olivia stared at the words until her vision blurred. Sarah must have been his wife, the woman who died, and Ethan was his son, the child no one at the office had ever seen or heard about. She placed the photograph back exactly as she found it and closed the drawer. Her hands were trembling. 3 weeks passed before Olivia discovered the full truth. It happened by accident. A colleague named Rebecca from the marketing department had been in a car accident and was recovering at St. Mary's Hospital across town. Olivia decided to visit after work, bringing flowers and a card signed by the team. The visit was brief. Rebecca was tired, but grateful. Olivia promised to check in again soon and made her way toward the exit. She took a wrong turn in the unfamiliar hallways. Instead of the main lobby, she found herself walking through a corridor lined with therapy rooms. A sign on the wall read, "Rehabilitation Center." Through a window, she saw patients working with physical therapists, elderly stroke survivors relearning how to grip objects, accident victims building strength in damaged limbs. And then she saw him. Daniel Brooks was kneeling on a blue mat beside a set of parallel bars. In front of him sat a boy in a wheelchair. The boy looked about 8 years old, with the same eyes as the child in the photograph, though his face was thinner now, more serious. His legs hung motionless beneath him. Daniel was speaking to him in that soft voice Olivia had only heard once before, during the noon phone calls. The boy gripped the parallel bars and pulled himself up. Olivia stood frozen at the window. She watched the boy take one trembling step, then another. His arms shook with effort, his face contorted with concentration. On the third step, his leg buckled and he fell. Daniel caught him before he hit the mat. Olivia expected panic. She expected frustration. Instead, Daniel smiled and held his son steady. He told him that was 3 steps more than yesterday. He called him champ. The boy looked up at his father with exhaustion and something else. Trust. Complete and unconditional trust. The boy asked a question that made Olivia's breath catch in her throat. He asked if his mother could see him from heaven. Daniel pulled his son into a hug and said she was watching every single step. He told him she was so proud of him. The boy rested his head on his father's shoulder, small body still trembling from exertion. Then he spoke again in a voice barely above a whisper. He said he did not need to walk. He just did not want his dad to carry him forever. Olivia turned away from the window. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She walked quickly toward the exit, past the nurse's station, through the automatic doors, into the cold evening air. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before she could drive. Her mind kept replaying what she had witnessed. The boy in the wheelchair, Daniel's gentle patience, the photograph from 2019 showing a laughing child who could still run on the beach. Something terrible had happened between then and now. She drove home in silence. Her apartment was large and modern, filled with expensive furniture she had chosen to impress people she never invited over. She sat on her couch without turning on the lights. The city glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She thought about Daniel's answer in the hallway weeks ago. Some doors stayed closed for a reason. Not every locked room hid a tragedy. Some just held something too precious to risk. Now she understood. Daniel was not refusing love because his wife had died. He was not trapped in grief or afraid of getting hurt again. He was refusing love because of Ethan, because his son needed all of him. Every minute, every dollar, every ounce of emotional energy. There was no room for romance when your child was fighting to walk again. There was no space for a relationship when your entire world revolved around therapy sessions and hospital bills and the small victories of 3 steps instead of 2. Olivia asked herself a question she did not want to answer. Could she accept being second? Could she love a man whose heart would always belong to someone else first? She had spent her entire life fighting to be enough, fighting to be seen, fighting to matter, too. Could she handle mattering less than a boy in a wheelchair? The answer should have been easy. She was a CEO. She was ambitious. She was not built for compromise. But the answer did not come. The next morning, Olivia made changes no one noticed. She quietly adjusted the meeting schedules so nothing ran past 5 o'clock. She extended deadlines for the finance department by reasonable margins. She stopped asking Daniel personal questions. When they passed in the hallway, she nodded politely and kept walking. Daniel seemed to sense the shift. His posture relaxed slightly when she was nearby. He nodded back at her with something that might have been gratitude. Neither of them spoke about it. 1 month later, everything collapsed. Olivia was leading a quarterly review meeting when Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. The meeting continued without him. 10 minutes passed. Olivia found it difficult to concentrate. She ended the meeting early and went looking for him. She found Daniel in the stairwell, sitting on the concrete steps with his phone pressed against his ear. His voice was strained, cracking on certain words. When he hung up, he did not move. He just sat there, staring at nothing. Olivia approached slowly and asked if everything was okay. Daniel looked up at her with eyes that had gone hollow. He told her his son had suffered complications. A spinal surgery was needed. Emergency procedure. The doctor said waiting was not an option. Olivia asked about the cost. Daniel laughed, but it was not a real laugh. It was the sound of a man watching his plans crumble. $80,000, he said. Insurance covered about half. He had savings, but not enough. Not nearly enough. And the surgery was just the beginning. Ethan would need 6 months of full-time care afterward, constant supervision, daily therapy. Someone had to be there every hour of every day. That someone could only be Daniel. He returned to his desk and worked through the rest of the afternoon like nothing had happened. But Olivia watched him. She saw his hands shake when he thought no one was looking. She saw him stare at his phone during the noon call, speaking longer than usual, his voice thicker. At 5:25, he packed his bag and left. Same as always. But nothing was the same. That night, Daniel sat beside Ethan's hospital bed. The room was quiet, except for the beeping of monitors. Ethan slept with his small hand curled around Daniel's fingers. A children's book lay open on the bedside table. Daniel had read 3 chapters before Ethan drifted off. Now he just sat in the dim light, watching his son breathe. He pulled out his phone and checked his bank account. The number on the screen was not enough. He opened his laptop and searched for loan options. The interest rates were brutal. He thought about selling the house, but the house was the only stable home Ethan had ever known since the accident. He thought about asking his parents, but they had already given everything they could. There were no solutions, only impossible choices. Daniel opened a blank document and began typing. A resignation letter. He wrote that he was grateful for the opportunity to work at the company. He wrote that personal circumstances required him to step away. He did not write about Ethan. He did not write about the accident that killed his wife and broke his son's spine. He did not write about the guilt that kept him awake every night, the guilt of being alive, the guilt of not being in the car that day, the guilt of working late while his family shattered. He saved the document and looked at Ethan. The boy's chest rose and fell slowly. His face was peaceful in sleep, free from pain for a few hours. Daniel reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his son's forehead. He spoke quietly, knowing Ethan could not hear him. He said he had spent 5 years trying to give him everything, and he still could not give him the one thing he needed, a chance to walk again. The monitor beeped steadily. Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Daniel sat in the darkness, holding his son's hand, preparing to sacrifice the last thing he had left. Daniel arrived at the office the next morning with the resignation letter folded in his jacket pocket. He had not slept. His eyes were red, and his movements were slower than usual. He walked past his desk without stopping, past the colleagues who nodded at him, past the coffee machine where someone was telling a joke. He went straight to the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. Olivia was already in her office when he knocked. She looked up from her computer and saw his face. Something in her chest tightened. She told him to come in. Daniel walked to her desk and placed the folded letter in front of her. He did not sit down. He said it was his resignation, effective immediately. He thanked her for the opportunities. He said the company had been good to him. Then he turned to leave. Olivia picked up the letter and read it quickly. 2 paragraphs of professional language that said nothing and everything at the same time. She looked at Daniel standing near the door, his back rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. She could see the exhaustion in his shoulders. She could see the defeat in the way he held himself. This was a man who had run out of options. She stood up from her chair and walked around the desk. Daniel watched her approach without speaking. She held the resignation letter in both hands, looked him directly in the eyes, and tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper filled the silent office. Daniel stared at the 2 pieces falling to the floor. Olivia told him he did not get to quit. Not on her watch. Daniel's jaw tightened. He asked what she wanted from him. He said he could not work the way he used to. His son needed surgery. His son needed full-time care. He could not sit in meetings while Ethan was alone in a hospital bed. He could not pretend everything was normal when his entire world was falling apart. Olivia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she walked back to her desk and pulled out a folder she had prepared the night before. She explained what she had done. The company had an employee emergency fund that most people never used because they didn't know it existed. She had filed the paperwork on Daniel's behalf. The fund would cover $30,000 of Ethan's medical expenses. Additionally, she had contacted the hospital's billing department and negotiated a zero-interest payment plan for the remaining balance. The payments would be spread over 3 years, small enough to manage on his current salary. Daniel stood motionless as she continued. She told him she was restructuring his position. Effective immediately, he would be a remote financial consultant. Same salary, same benefits. But he could work from home. He could work from the hospital. He could work from wherever Ethan needed him to be. His deliverables would be project-based, not hour-based. As long as the work got done, no one would ask where or when he did it. The folder sat on her desk between them. Daniel did not reach for it. He asked why she was doing this. She barely knew him. He had given her nothing but resistance since she arrived. He had refused her offers, avoided her questions, walked away from every conversation she tried to start. Why would she fight for someone who had never let her in? Olivia's expression shifted. The professional mask she wore in meetings slipped away. She told him the truth. She had grown up alone, no parents, no family, just a series of foster homes and group houses where no one stayed long enough to matter. She had learned early that the world did not give second chances. If you fell, you stayed down. No one reached back to help you up. She had built her entire career on the belief that she would never need anyone to save her. But then she saw him. She saw him kneeling beside his son in the rehabilitation center. She saw him catching Ethan when he fell. She saw him telling his boy that 3 steps were more than yesterday. She realized something that changed everything she thought she knew. Daniel was not weak for needing help. He was not failing as a father. He was doing something she had never witnessed in her entire life. He was loving someone more than he loved himself, and that kind of love deserved to be protected. Daniel's eyes glistened. He looked away, trying to compose himself. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. He asked how she knew about Ethan, how she knew about the rehabilitation center. Olivia admitted the truth. She had seen them by accident during a hospital visit weeks ago. She had watched through the window. She had heard Ethan ask about his mother in heaven. She apologized for invading his privacy. She said she understood if he was angry. Daniel was not angry. He was something else entirely. He looked at the folder on her desk, then at the torn resignation letter on the floor, then at Olivia, standing before him with an honesty he had not expected. He asked if they could talk somewhere else, not as CEO and employee, just as 2 people who had both spent too long pretending they were fine. They went to a small coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. It was nearly empty in the middle of the morning. They sat across from each other at a corner table. Daniel wrapped his hands around a cup he did not drink from. He told her everything. The accident 5 years ago. His wife Sarah driving Ethan to school. The truck that ran a red light. Sarah dying on impact. Ethan surviving with a severed spine. He told her about the guilt. The morning of the accident, he was supposed to drive Ethan to school, but there was an important meeting. He asked Sarah to take the boy instead. He chose work over his family for 1 hour. That 1 hour destroyed everything. He had spent 5 years trying to make up for a decision he could never undo. Olivia listened without speaking. When Daniel finished, the coffee shop was still quiet around them. She asked him the question that had started everything between them. What was stopping him from dating? She asked it differently this time, not as a challenge, not as a demand, just a question from someone who genuinely wanted to understand. Daniel looked at her across the table. He said nothing was stopping him. That was the truth. He was not afraid of love. He was not trapped in grief. He had simply made a choice. Ethan deserved a father who was completely present, not someone whose attention was divided between a child and a girlfriend, not someone who would cancel therapy sessions for dinner dates, not someone who would choose romance over recovery. Ethan came first. Ethan would always come first. And any woman who entered Daniel's life would have to accept being second. He told Olivia that most people could not accept that. Most people wanted to be the priority. They wanted to be chosen. They wanted to feel like they mattered more than anyone else. He could not offer that. He would never be able to offer that. So he stopped trying. He closed the door before anyone could walk through it and get hurt. Olivia absorbed his words. She thought about her own life, the empty apartment, the awards on her shelf that no one celebrated with her, the success that felt hollow because she had no one to share it with. She had spent years convincing herself that independence was strength. Now she wondered if it was just another kind of loneliness. She asked Daniel one more question. What about him? Did he not deserve to be happy too? Did he not deserve someone who cared about him, not just what he could provide? Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. It was a small smile, tired, but genuine. He told her he was happy. Every time Ethan smiled, every time he took one more step, every time he fell asleep holding his father's hand. That was happiness. He had not given up on love. He had just found a different kind. The words broke something inside Olivia. She felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. She was not crying because Daniel had rejected her. She was crying because his answer was so pure, so complete, so utterly selfless. She had never met anyone like him. She wondered if she ever would again. 6 months passed. The surgery was successful. Ethan's recovery was slow but steady. Daniel worked from home, from hospital rooms, from physical therapy waiting areas. He submitted his reports on time and never missed a deadline. Olivia checked in occasionally through email, keeping her messages professional but warm. She did not push. She did not expect anything. She simply let him know the door was open if he ever wanted to walk through it. On a Thursday afternoon in spring, Daniel brought Ethan to the rehabilitation center for what the doctors called a milestone session. Ethan had been working toward this moment for months, walking 10 steps unassisted. No wheelchair, no parallel bars, just his own legs carrying him forward. The therapist positioned Ethan at one end of the room. Daniel stood 10 steps away, arms open, waiting. Ethan gripped his crutches and took a breath. Then he let go. His first step was shaky. His second was stronger. By the 5th step, his face was red with effort. By the 8th step, his legs trembled violently. But he did not stop. He did not fall. On the 10th step, he collapsed into his father's arms. Daniel held his son so tightly that Ethan laughed and complained he could not breathe. The therapist wiped her eyes. The nurses in the hallway clapped. And standing in the doorway, holding a small teddy bear, was Olivia Carter. Ethan noticed her first. He looked over his father's shoulder and grinned. He asked if that was his dad's boss. He said she was pretty. Daniel turned around. He saw Olivia standing there with the teddy bear and an uncertain smile. He looked at his son, then back at her. For the first time in 5 years, his smile reached his eyes. He told Ethan yes. She was pretty. Olivia walked into the room and handed Ethan the bear. He thanked her and immediately started showing her the drawings he had made during recovery. Superheroes and spaceships, and a family portrait that included a woman with wings watching from the clouds. Olivia sat beside him and listened to every story. Daniel watched them together. Something shifted in his chest. Something he had not felt in years. Later that evening, after Ethan fell asleep clutching his new teddy bear, Olivia and Daniel stood in the hospital hallway. She told him she was proud of him. She told him Ethan was the bravest kid she had ever met. Daniel thanked her for everything, for the job, for the fund, for the payment plan, for not giving up on him when he had already given up on himself. Olivia shook her head. She said she used to think love was about being someone's first choice. She thought it was about being the most important person in someone's life. But Daniel had taught her something different. Sometimes the most beautiful love was the kind that made room for others, the kind that did not demand to be first, the kind that simply asked to be part of something bigger. She told him she was not asking for anything. She did not expect him to change his priorities. She just wanted him to know that if there was ever room in his world, she would be honored to be part of it. Not as his first priority, just as part of his world. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The hallway was quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Through the window, he could see Ethan sleeping peacefully, one hand wrapped around the teddy bear, the other reaching toward the empty space beside him. Daniel took Olivia's hand. He did not promise anything. He did not make grand declarations. He simply held her hand and let the silence speak for him. Sometimes doors stayed closed for a reason, but sometimes, after enough time and enough healing, they could open again. Not every love story ends with a kiss. Some end with a hand reaching out. Some end with a door cracking open. Some end with the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, there is room for one more.